أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Amma ba'd, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It is the blessed month of Ramadan, which is the month of the Quran also. And we started with the brief Tafsir of Surah al-Qiyamah. This Surah number 75 of the Quran. Inshallah, we'll be concluding the remaining ayat tonight. And tomorrow is the Wiladat Jashan of the second Imam, and that will be conclusion of my meeting with you for this year, for this Ramadan. Inshallah, after Ramadan, we'll see you on the first Thursday of the month. When we looked at this Surah al-Qiyamah, the name itself, says that the major theme of this surah is al-Qiyamah. And it's interesting that although the theme of Qiyamah and the Day of Judgment has been mentioned in the Quran many places, there are about more than 500 ayat dealing with this. But this is the only surah which is known by that name, Surah al-Qiyamah. And we saw that the major theme of this surah was the theme of the Qiyamah. Tonight we'll be ending with ayat number 36 to ayat number 40. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by saying, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانَ أَنْ يُتْرَكَ سُدًى أَلَمْ يَكُنْ نُطْفَةً مِّن مَنِيٍّ يُمْنَى. What does the human being think that he shall be left to roam at will? أَلَمْ يَكُنْ نُطْفَةً مِّن مَنِيٍّ يُمْنَى. Was he not a sperm drop spilled? ثُمَّ كَانَ عَلَقَةً. Then he was a blood clot. فَخَلَقَ فَسَوَّى. And he created and formed it. فَجَعَلَ مِنْهُ الزَّوْجَيْنَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنْثَى. And he made it into two kinds, male and female. أَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ بِقَادِرٍ عَلَىٰ أَنْ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. What is he not capable of reviving the dead? And that's the end of this surah. It's interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as I mentioned before also, and looking at different other surahs, that the end of the surah actually is like the summary or conclusion of the surah. And in this surah, which was a short surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala initially began after the two qasam, لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بنفس اللوامة. He then mentioned, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانَ أَن لَن نَجْمَعْ إِظَامَهُ. Does the human being think that we will not gather his bones? This is how this surah began, the third ayat. At the end, the last passage, which is a conclusion, Allah uses the same wordings. أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانَ أَن يُتْرَكَ سُدًى. Coming back to the same theme. That what does the human being think that he will be left to roam at will without any purpose? The word Suda basically is used primarily in the Arabic language, when you leave your goat or your cow or your camel to roam around, in the area where they have the pasture there. Pasturage that they can just go wherever they want. There is no control, there is no direction. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Does the human being think that I created him, just to go around and do whatever he wants to do? There is no purpose behind it, there is no direction behind it, there is no planning behind it. No, this is not how, anyone who is a wise, not only God, but even a human being, doesn't do anything without a purpose or a plan or an objective there. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what He says, that in another part of the Quran where He says, أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَسًا. Do you think that we have created you without a purpose? Abas means without an aim, without a purpose. وَأَنْتُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ, and that you will not return back to us. So the whole issue of Qiyamah and the return and the life in hereafter actually gives purpose to this life. Otherwise, there is no difference between us and the animals. What is the purpose? To come to this dunya, parents work hard to raise us, to take care of us. Then we become adults, we go around struggling. By the time we reach to the point where we say, okay, let's enjoy the dunya, it is the end. So the question is this the beginning and end of our existence? Then it is abas. There is no meaning or purpose there. This life in this dunya gets purpose only if we know that there is something at the end. Whatever we do here, we will see the result at the end. And it is in our hand whether we build our akhirah as a place of, bliss or the place of pain. It's in our hand. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I didn't create you without a purpose. And so this is where he begins this last passage by saying, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانَ أَنْ يُتْرَكَ سُدًى. Does he think that he will be just left to roam around, without a purpose? No. And then he continues, going back, this is interesting that earlier the question was, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانَ أَنْ لَنْ نَجْمَعَ عِظَامًا. The thought and the wondering of the human being was that how is Allah going to bring our bones back? When they decay and they turn into dust, how is He going to resurrect them? And the response Allah gave at that time was, He said, you are worried about the bones which are solid and strong. Allah says, بَلِ قَادَرِينَ أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانَا. We can even recreate your fingertips. Those days, Arabs didn't know about it. Now we know that you can have billions of human beings, but each one has a different, sign there, and the composition of the lines and everything there is different. This is where we know one another as far as our ID is concerned. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there says, you are surprised about me bringing back the bones. I can even recreate your fingertips. At the end now, he is also bringing another example. You think that I created you without a purpose? He says, look at yourself. You are surprised that how will resurrection take place? Alam yakun nutfatan min maniyyin yumna. You have forgotten your own origin. You were nothing but a sperm drop, yumna, which is just spilled. When we have these issues in our fiqh where we say najasat, sometimes we think about it. It's nothing to do, only to do with the issue of najasat and then the ghusl. There is a lesson behind it. This is something very precious. It is something very valuable in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the beginning of the human being. But by saying this is najis, and then you connect with the another list in the najasat, what we call mayyit. So the beginning of a human being is najasat. When we die, between our death and the time ghusl mayyit is given, the most pious of a mu'min, the most learned of the mu'mineen, even if he is a marza taqleed, still that body will be considered to be najis. What is the point there? Not everything has to be looked at from the scientific and physical point of view. There is actually a message. Don't allow yourself to be arrogant. Your beginning is najasat, your end is najasat. Not because, money doesn't have worth in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, that is one of the most precious, sign of Allah's power, which He uses as an example many times when people are wondering about resurrection and how things will be brought back. He says, look at your own origin. Amir al-Mu'minin, actually this idea of, beginning of najasat and end, taken from a statement of Amir al-Mu'minin, where he says, I'm surprised at this human being, awwaluhu nutfa wa akhiruhu jifa, that his beginning is nutfa, as sperm drop, and his end is a mayyit, and in between, what does he do in the life? Ali says he's carrier of waste. What is in our belly every day? We have to throw it out, huh? And so Ali says, this is your beginning, this is your end. In between, you are a carrier of waste and nothing, and still you allowed yourself to be arrogant? Think about yourself. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this in a different context here, where He says, you are surprised about resurrection? Just look at your own beginning. You were nothing. I created you and formed you in the womb of your mother from that one drop. There is another ayat also where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it in more detail, where He says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ صَلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاهُ نُطْفَةً فِي قَرَارٍ مَكِينٍ. We created man from extract of clay from the earth. Then we set him a drop, nutfatan fi qararin makin, in a secure place, referring to the womb of the mother. And then He says, what happens in there? ثُمَّ خَلَقْنَا النُّطْفَ عَلَقَةً. Then we made the sperm into a clot, and then the clot is changed into a tissue, and the tissue is then changed into bones. And then He says, فَكَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا. Then we covered the bones with flesh. ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. Once the body is formed, Allah says, now we changed him into a different creature. This is when the ruh comes in. When the ruh comes in, Allah says, now you are something else. Before that, you were something else. And this is where He takes pride. فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. Blessed is the one who is the best of creators. And then He relates this whole issue of the creation of the human being to the issue of resurrection. ثُمَّ إِنَّكُمْ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ لَمَيِّتُونَ. And then you die one day. ثُمَّ إِنَّكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ تُبْعَثُونَ. Then on the day of judgment, you will be resurrected and brought back to life. And so Allah is connecting this whole process, that from one drop I can create you. The potential of a human being is in that one drop. The one who can do that, for him, resurrection of a dead person is not that difficult at all. And then he goes on to say, فَجَعَلَ مِنْهُ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكْرَ وَالْأُنْثَى. And while the baby is growing in the womb of the mother, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then I make them into male or female. It takes few months where the parents don't know about it. I don't know how those people are going to respond to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who use modern techniques to find out the gender and then abort if it's a female. And this is a serious problem of the modern science and the modern ways of using it. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it is my wisdom that one drop, I can turn it into male or I can turn it into female. It is my will and my choice. And this issue of taking something and making into zawjain, al-dhakara wal-unsa, has a global implication. It's not only for the human beings. In Surah Yasin, He says, Subhanallah khalaqa al-azwaja kullaha. Blessed is the one who has created pairs in everything. Mimma tumbitul ard. Even the plants which grow in the earth, Allah says there is a male and a female there. Only modern science has come to realize that. At the time when Quran was revealed, nobody knew about it. وَمِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. Then Allah says, even among human beings, you have male and female. And by extension, even in the animal world. وَمِمَّا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And then Allah says, even in the entities that you don't know, I have created male and female and genders even among them. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using this creation of a human being as a way of making it easy for those who deny Qiyamah to accept that phenomenon. And therefore he ends by saying, the one who can do all this, أَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ بِقَادِرٍ عَلَىٰ أَنْ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى? Is he not capable of reviving the dead? And that is the end of the message of this surah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us the tawfiq to go through this short surah and various issues and themes that we have derived from it. Some were directly linked to it, some were extension of the themes from it, so that we can have this insight of the Quran to make our lives better according to the pleasure and ridha of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasul and the Imam of the time, Ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj sharif. What I would like to do is just very briefly go through the whole surah without commentary. Now that you read it, heard about different, explanation about, so we'll just go through it just to capture the theme in its entirety. And so this is how I begin. We are leaving the Arabic on the side. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I swear by the day of resurrection, and I swear by the self-blaming soul. Whatever you see the italics, these are the words I have added just to give the context and the meaning of the ayat in there. I swear by the day of resurrection, and I swear by the self-blaming soul that works like your judge, that the judgment day in the hereafter is the truth. When Allah swears by nafs al-lawwama, He is saying that if there is a judge within you, whenever you do right or wrong, it tells you it's not right, don't do it. Well, if there is a judge in your own inner world, there has to be a judge for the global world also. And that is what will happen on the day of Qiyamah. Does man suppose that we shall not put together his bones? Yes, indeed. We are capable of creating not only his bones, but even his fingertips fully. This is the way Allah responded to that surprise of the creation of the bones. And then the ayat goes on where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about why people deny Qiyamah or this concept of Qiyamah. Man is not actually surprised about resurrection. Anyone who has any, sense of reflecting on these issues, they cannot deny the possibility of resurrection. And so it's not that they are actually surprised, rather man wants to ignore the hereafter because he desires to go on living viciously. If there is no qiyamah, there is no hisab kitab, there is no accountability, the person would be free to do whatever he or she wants to do in this dunya. That is the motive for denying qiyamah. As a way of ridicule, he asked, and this is a question which was put to the Prophet by one of the mushrikeen, when is this day of resurrection? And he didn't ask that because he wanted to know. He was asking that just to ridicule the idea and the Prophet himself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to that and talks about the events leading to resurrection. So when the eyes are dazzled, the moon is eclipsed, means the light of the nur and the light of the moon would be taken away, and the sun and the moon are brought together, the whole system will collapse. On that day of resurrection, men will say, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you are denying now, but when the resurrection happens, you will be the first one, you will say, where is the escape? Ayn al-mafar? Looking for what we call mafar means rah farar. There will be no exit signs over there. Everything is there. There is no danger of, going out in that way. So there is no mafar. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says no. Kalla la wadar, there will be no refuge. On that day, the abode will be towards your Lord. The mustaqar, the place where everything will be, stable. That is the place of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On that day, and this is a very important ayat, I think we should always keep this in mind. On that day, man will be informed of the deeds that he has sent ahead and the legacy of his actions that he has left behind. So what we do and goes there, and what we leave behind of the activities which are still continuing after we die. Good or bad, our account book would still be open. Indeed, man himself is fully aware of himself. بل الإنسان على نفسه بصيرة. We don't need this malaika to judge ourselves. We don't need our limbs to testify for or against us on the day of Qiyamah. We don't even want Allah to give us the book. Any human being can look at themselves and then they will be in a position to decide what is their situation. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that indeed, man himself is fully aware of himself, even though he offers his excuses to justify his misdeeds. It is human nature. Even when we know we are wrong, we'll still say, well, this was the reason or that was the reason. Somehow justification is there. And then we come to some of the ayat there in between, which is the minor theme of this surah about the Quran, because rejection of the Qiyamah is in a way a rejection of the Quran itself. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it, and we talked about tanzil and inzal, so I will not go into it. O Muhammad, do not move your tongue with it, means with the Quran, in order to hasten its recitation and its compilation. O Muhammad, don't worry about it. When Jibreel is coming, don't go ahead of Jibreel in completing the ayat. Because the Prophet knew the ayat even before Jibreel had come. O Muhammad, indeed, its compilation and its recitation is upon us. Allah consoles the Prophet that don't worry about who will compile this or whether this book will be recited or not. Allah says it is my responsibility. It's not your problem. And so once we have recited it, then follow its recitation. It doesn't mean Allah recites. It means when the Jibreel, the messenger of Allah in form of the angel, when he recites, then Rasulullah has to follow that recitation. And also remember that thereafter its explanation is also indeed upon us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not only take the jam' of Quran, compilation of the Quran on himself, even the bayan of the Quran, he says, ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانُهُ. It is on me to make sure that the bayan of the Quran reaches the people. And this is where Ayatul Akhui says, we have the Quran. Where is the bayan of the Quran mentioned in this ayat? And he says, this is where you have to go to Muhammad and Ali and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, alayhimu salatu wa salam. Then Allah describes the other reason why people deny Qiyamah. The unbelievers deny the resurrection not because there's missing there. Don't deny the resurrection because they doubt God's power. No, indeed. They actually deny because they love this transitory life and forsake the hereafter. Because this hubb of this dunya, the love of this dunya holds them back from believing in the Qiyamah. On that day of resurrection, some faces will be fresh, looking forward to the mercy of their Lord. And some faces will be squalling on that day, sad and angry, knowing very well that they will be inflicted with a punishment which will break the backs. When the soul reaches, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the state of death when it comes to the denier of the Qiyamah. When the soul reaches up to the collarbones, the spelling is wrong, but anyway, you understand what it means. When the soul reaches up to the collarbones, and it is announced by the family members who can save him, and by the angels that who will take him up. At that time, he knows that it is the time for parting from the family and the wealth that he loved most. And upon death, each shank claps the other shank, means, the limbs become completely motionless, cannot move anymore. That day he shall be driven towards your Lord. And when he comes on the, to this dunya, when he's there in this dunya, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about those who don't believe in Qiyamah, that he neither affirmed the belief in the hereafter, nor he prayed. And this is where we see the importance of Aqeedah, as well as the importance of Amal. And prayer has been mentioned as the example there in this ayat. Rather, he denied the resurrection and turned away from Allah. Turning away from Allah is the opposite of praying. So when you pray, you are in a way symbolically facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you don't do that, you are turning away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he went to his family arrogantly. This is actually about one of the mushrikeen who rejected the message of Qiyamah in the presence of Rasulullah and behaved in this manner. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of, very angrily actually responds to this fellow, especially, أَوْلَ لَكَ فَأَوْلَى ثُمَّ أَوْلَ لَكَ فَأَوْلَى. It's not double, it's actually 4 lanats altogether. So woe to you, again woe to you, and woe to you. So somebody who did not believe in the Qiyamah. And this is where we come to the last passage that we looked at this evening. What does the human being think that he shall be left to roam at will? Was he not a sperm drop spilled? Then he was a blood clot, and he means Allah created and formed, and he made it of 2 kinds, male and female. What? Is he not capable or able to revive the dead? And that is the conclusion of this surah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity. And inshallah, I hope me and you all, we have learned some important lessons from this surah, which will make us be among the better servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and better Muslims, and better Shias of Ali and Ali salawatullah alayhi ajma'een, inshallah. We have about 5 to 7 minutes, so any questions? This is your opportunity. Yes. Yeah, let me just phrase it in that way that everybody can follow. Basically, the question is, in one of the lectures I talked about shaitan being the enemy. But I wanted to emphasize that although he is the open enemy for us, but he only gains access when we allow shaitan to influence us. There were about 7, 8 points I had mentioned, that these are the points of access that we give to shaitan, where he comes and influences us. And your question basically is that when we have different kinds of thoughts, how do you distinguish whether this is my own thoughts or this is shaitan? For us, I don't think it's that important to identify whether it's from our the nafs ammara bisu, means that negative dimension of ourself which incites us to do evil, whether it's from ourselves or it is from shaitan or for combination of both. I think the main thing is for us to be able to distinguish and know that this is a wrong thought. As far as shaitan is concerned, I think, when we say these words, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan, this prayer that, oh Allah, I seek refuge with you against the shaitan. This is a very important dua. Sometimes we just learn about it from childhood, but we don't really think about it. This is a very powerful statement. It is required more for a mu'min than anyone else. Shaitan is not worried about those who are fasiq. Shaitan only comes to the mu'mineen. You might see somebody who is a good mu'min, very punctual in prayers. This is where he comes. And even in prayers, he can be there. And therefore, for example, one of the recommendations is that after you say the takbiratul ihram, the first takbir, before you start Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim of Surah Fatiha, in between silently say A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitan al-Rajim. Because even at that stage, you already done takbir, but shaitan can still come and influence there. And so there's this dua of, seeking protection with Allah against the shaitan is a very important thing, and that is what we should be focusing on.
That's coming to the same question actually, which like the Quran is been like mentioned like nafs al-ammara bisu and nafs al-mutma'inna and nafs al-lawwama, which is I believe it's become a nafs al-lawwama and nafs al-mutma'inna, which is I believe like it's kind of improvement you do it to reach to the nafs al-mutma'inna in there.
Well,
maybe my question is like how to discipline yourself, because here you need to know if that's coming from you or it's coming from the shaitan. So you might need to discipline yourself, right?
well, the brother is continuing that question that the other brother had asked. What I would say, brother, if you were here in the earlier discussions, when it says, لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة, we had next day a long discussion about nafs lawwama, nafs ammara, as well as nafs mutma'inna. And there was a whole chart and diagram which talked about it, that the normal situation is that everyone has nafs lawwama, that sense of guilt. It can become weak, it can become strong. The challenge is to always keep it up. The fasting of the month of Ramadan is to build that willpower, the nafs al-lawwama. If it is reached to the very high level, that's where you get to the level of itmi'inan. If it becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, that's where you get into the situation of that nafs turning into nafs ammara bisu. Okay, so we already talked about it. Inshallah, you can look at the videos of the earlier discussions that we had. 2 more minutes to go. At least you wouldn't think about eating, so we can be busy with that. No more? Okay, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He may accept our amal of this month and give us the tawfiqat to complete it in the best manner. And may He always keep us among the Shia of Ali and Ali. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help all the Muslims, especially the Shias of Ali all over the world. And may He weaken all the plans and the strategies of the takfiri forces. And may He hasten the appearance of the Imam of the time. Ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj al-sharif. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.